one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am your host, David Streggy, and here I have another wonderful, fantastic cult film for you,
Cult?
folks. Cult.
This isn't a cult film. This is like one of the most popular mainstream movies ever made. What are you talking about?
It did start as sort of a cult film.
It is kind of
True.
a cult film because it started a phenomenal franchise.
I mean, it's like, I guess Jaws is a cult film too. Okay, sure.
Well, if we're being real, though, Terminator does have that distinction where most people like heap all their praise on T2. Yeah.
Well, T2 is better, but you know, this is pretty damn close. It's like T2 is like a 9.5. This is like a 9.4.
Right, and I feel like they're two different, different types of films. So.
Well, we're watching Terminator, by the way. So we accidentally ruined the intro with
Hasta la vista bullshit. You know.
Well, the film is directed by James Cameron. The film is also filmed in 1984. And I'm just going to read something from IMDb here, kind of explaining about the film. In 1984, a human soldier is tasked to stop an indestructible cyborg killing machine, both sent from 2029, from executing a young woman whose unborn son is the key to humanity's future salvation.
In the not too distant future.
Yeah, I know. The year is almost upon us that they came from the future from, isn't it?
Boy, don't point that out because we already have to deal with the fact that we don't have Blade Runner cars and shit.
Or hoverboards.
Yeah, we're fucked, all right? They're supposed to be Transformers. I was supposed to be hanging out with Autobots in like 2005.
So, I'm just going to start here with Dustin and your first impressions. What were your first impressions of this film?
Well, I mean, I first saw this on TV, and, you know, it's... So, one of the challenges with talking about a movie like this, like, mainstream famous, like, and this influential, is that it feels like it's hard to find something new to say about it. So, I mean, I first saw this on TV, and it blew me away. I think I was, like, 10. Like, you know, even with all the stuff that came after it that kind of, like, ripped it off or, like, used the premise in one way or another, like, it was still, like, very unique. And, yeah, it's kind of about, it's kind of about the size of it, really. Like, it had... maybe not the best special effects in retrospect, but they still hold up very well.
They do.
I mean, like, this
action
is
sequences, especially.
like I'm trying to find ways to just not simply go, you know, this is an amazing movie, because this is an amazing movie.
It's fucking hard,
and I want to be more creative with how I express that. But
well,
best we got.
I think that's kind of the nature of Terminator as a film. I mean, you sort of have this dude comes back in time and he's supposed to protect this lady while this fucking robot comes back in time and is just blowing motherfuckers away, tossing bitches through like plate glass.
Like, it's got sci-fi, it's got horror, it's got action. Like, it's just got so much to it, you know.
And that's why I think, I mean, obviously we'll touch on this more later on, but definitely I sort of hold this one in terms of like filmmaking above T2 in a lot of ways, you know. But
I'd say it's more artful than T2.
Exactly. And it's a lot more of an actual movie instead of being like just sort of a combination of action scenes like T2 was. This one definitely plays on that thriller aspect of it a little bit with the whole, you know, people getting blasted because their name in a fucking phone book type of a thing.
What was your first experience with this one, Mo?
Oh, dude, I don't even know. This is one of those ones where it's kind of like I don't really remember the first time I saw Terminator, probably because I grew up on that shit. Like as soon as I started watching horror movies and science fiction movies, my uncles were like, "Oh, well, come over here, little kid, fucking check this out," you know. And so I was lucky enough to have like film geeks, I guess, as family members that showed me a lot of fucked up stuff. Terminator, I think my first like moment that I recognized how badass it was probably the first time I held a Terminator comic in my hand. And I was like, whoa, there's like these two movies, and then we also have these awesome comics. Dark Horse.
There's a lot of Terminator stuff now. Like it really took off like so incredibly hard. Like you can get Terminator anything. Kind of like Aliens.
Well, Terminator, Terminator, Alien, and Predator were all part of that first wave of sort of like Dark Horse and random imprint comics that tried to do something cool with those film properties. When you could put the early Nightmare on Elm Street or like Friday the 13th comics right there with it too. And they all similarly kick ass in the sense that it was like dudes like all of us that wrote it,
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of mythology to chew on that Terminator's like premise allows to. So like there's so much like extra stuff, and it works the same with Alien and Predator. Although I'm less familiar with Predator because I was more of an Alien kid.
Right.
But,
so it's kind of the middle ground for some reason. Even though I love Alien, I've read less Alien comics than I have Predator. And for Predator is kind of the middle. It's like ass kicking and Aliens, Whereas Alien, those comics tend to be more about like the fucking loss of humanity.
It's more like space drama with a lot of the Alien comics.
Exactly.
Those are kind of the ones I don't enjoy as much, but whenever the alien shows up, yeah.
Concrete Jungle all motherfucking day. That should have been Predator
nice.
too.
I have that on my shelf. Like I need to actually like sit down and read it. Like it's one of like the novels. So, oh man, there's so much great content. Wow, we just totally nerded out about like sci-fi workbenches.
We did, and I can tell by David's chuckle that he needs to fucking read Concrete Jungle. Because he hasn't.
I mean, I played Concrete Jungle, but I'm pretty sure it's very different from the actual written work.
Let's go over to Jake here. Jake, why don't you tell us your first impressions with this film?
I'm actually going to be coming at this as a very different perspective from most people my age, at least. I'm a very bad child of the 80s because I never saw this movie until after I graduated from college.
I need a wallet to bite down on. Yeah.
And I had basically...
It breaks my heart, but I can't stop loving him. I love him.
Pumping the morphine.
I had seen a small portion on TV of Terminator 2 in the 90s, but that was really all I'd seen. And yeah, I finally watched it probably around 04-ish. And I had not seen it again until yesterday. So I've seen it twice. And both viewings left me with the same basic impression, which was, is that all? To be honest, like as much as people rave about this movie, I watched it and I'm like, is that all? Is that really?
Dude, how though?
It's not a bad movie. I mean, and if you look at it, honestly, it was originally intended to be a horror film more than an action film.
I think it touches in a bit.
In a way, it's kind of a slasher film. The Terminator
really
is your typical villain.
Yeah.
I had somebody say that on Twitter too.
But obviously, he uses big ass guns instead of knives. So if you look at it in that genre, it is one of the better ones I've seen. If you look at it in terms of sci-fi, it's decent, but it leaves me with this. I'm just as cold toward Blade Runner. Just both of them, they don't. I'm just cold to them.
See, dude, and at the risk of offending you, I would say that that's probably because you are such an obvious student of film, like me and Brandon tend to like a lot of like shittier shit than you.
Yeah, and there with your monocle and your skybox.
Yeah, Brandon, fucking Jake is like
Bayou
the
Jack.
fucking.
Well, if I remember correctly,
He's the most legitimate film fan.
if I
think,
remember
of all of
correctly,
us, you know.
well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Dustin, but we just finished our Thanksgiving 3 discussion. If I remember correctly, I think you were one of the ones who really, really, really did not like the first one. Like, really did not. Am I right?
I was somewhat biased because this podcast I listened to, God Awful Movies, like they did it as a bonus episode, and they really hated it and just did not get it, and so that kind of tainted my opinion of it. Like when I watched it myself.
So I think when we did the discussion, I came off more positive on Thanksgiving than Dustin did. So,
I would honestly be surprised that Dustin didn't like it, because it's such a fucking greasy little shitbag film that.
Well, actually, was Dane
I don't
still
like
with us
poop.
when we did that?
Weird
Because
me
he
out.
was probably the one that really hated on it.
Yeah, we used to have like a really intellectual
Oh god.
like film student person on here, but they had a life, so
Yeah.
I miss them. I miss them a lot.
We all do, I think, to a point, but you can be an intellectual film student, dude, and still fucking make something awesome or like enjoy the awesome in something.
Yeah,
Well-
yeah. And I can enjoy bad stuff. And again, I don't think Terminator is a bad movie. It's just, it's not really I'm not as big a horror fan as most of the people here. And I'm not as big a sci-fi fan as a lot of people are. So and a lot of that early 80s stuff had that strong 80s vibe that
It does.
that kind of you got like a lot of you get people who really get into particular.
You know what's sad?
It feels like a pair of Keds and a high top on you. You know what I mean? Like it fucking.
What's
Well,
sad
like
is
that those Nikes that he put on like right at the beginning or whatever. I was like, oh yeah, that feels like that time period.
You guys remember those socks, the Keds, where you had like the little grippy
Right.
holes on the bottom? God, I remember. I missed that so bad.
what's sad is that we tackled Maniac Cop before we did this one. So, to me, that is another film that had something to do with some big buff dude going and attacking, just literally obliterating a police station.
Yeah, I actually just listened to your guys' Maniac Cop discussion the other day when I was working, and the whole thing, and it was great. But I think a lot of these movies you guys have to visit in hindsight. I think after the fact, like Maniac Cop, I feel like there's a couple of you that movie would grow on with repeated watches.
Yeah.
And that's anything though, really.
Maniac Cop is so dope though. Like
It is, right?
Yeah.
Like it's fucking there's a lot of layers to that I feel like didn't get touched on in the initial discussion, but that's how an initial discussion of something like that goes.
you can tell like how hard my semester is by how active I am on some of the episodes. And I think that was during like the beginning of finals last year, so it was like, yeah, I'm like reading like a paper that I need to like finish writing by tomorrow, like as I talk,
Well, let me tell you, dude, you are missed. Like I enjoy you on the discussion. I enjoy your channel. I haven't been
Thank you.
commenting lately. I've been watching a lot of it at work, so that's when I don't comment as much.
Oh,
Because obviously it's like
hopefully
playing on
we'll
my
have more.
phone.
We'll have more stuff shot tomorrow, I hope. So like I finally got a bunch of stuff done. So I keep trying to do this review of The Blob, but there's like
Which one?
the 1988 Blob. Like Chef Factory came out with like an amazing Blu-ray of it that just kicks the absolute piss out of the Twilight Time Blu-ray.
See, there's stuff like that. If you ever want, dude, I can like kick you a clip of me reviewing it like 4 years ago. That's long since off my channel.
Oh, what I did was I watched everything and I took like a paragraph of notes on like every every part of it that I watched, like every extra and like featurette. And I just have to figure out, I took so many notes, I have to figure out a way to like put it into like one coherent like script so that I can actually talk about it without getting lost or like forgetting where I was.
See, this might sound
And that's
stupid
been
to
the
people
hard
because we're
part.
talking about The Blob, but That movie is that magnificent, you know. Like,
It's so good. Oh my god! Like the only problem I have with it is for some reason they didn't touch on the music anywhere on the disc, which is
Oh,
almost a conspiracy because it has some of like the best freaking music ever.
well, being
But
as how
anyway,
we've
back to
touched on that
Terminator.
multiple times
Yeah.
tonight, I think fucking music in movies definitely needs to be a little bit more to the forefront of discussion because
right.
a lot of
Oh.
times it sets the whole mood and
Terminator starts out with like that opening theme
right.
Oh, yeah.
where it's like it's hard to describe. It's like a mournful kind of thing with like it's like mournful yet kind of hopeful at the same time. And there's like the anvil pounding like sound effect in there too. Like that's
Right.
what I remember the most when I think of
I gotta
Terminator.
ask, okay, and I think this denotes like the true fans that have done this, but you ever like get, you know, stop your shower and it's all steamy in your bathroom and you do that like naked crouch rise thing from Terminator?
I've maybe done that a couple of times.
Yeah, you got to. I mean,
not
it's
recently,
like,
but
a lot of times I do it in my bathtub, so it has like that cool swirling effect. Even though no one's watching, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah, of
I'm the
course.
fucking Terminator right
Of
now.
course, I'm not as buff as Arnold there. I'm more like the Amazing Bulk.
Dude, I built like a human cinnamon roll, and I still do that shit.
I know when I get out of the shower, like I think more like Ra's al Ghul from like Arkham City. It's like he goes into the
Fuck
Lazarus pit and he's like crusty and old, and he comes out and he's like super buff and his eyes are freaking glowing.
Mm.
Like
Dude,
his
we gotta get
tattoos
some of you
light
guys
up. And
in
it's
our
like, oh
comic
shit,
club
he's so much
maybe.
stronger now.
Dude,
What
we do
type of
happy
shower are
hour
you
club
taking?
I mean,
every week, and
just
I
think,
think some of you guys would really dig that comic club that we do.
just think. Arnold gets to start out every single Terminator buff the butt naked. You know, I mean,
I haven't seen Dark Fate or Salvation, so I don't know if he's naked in every Terminator.
You read comics at all, David?
I have from time to time. I actually gave or traded Dustin some comics I kind of went through.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm part of like a book club. We don't do fucking like broadcasts. It's not a YouTube thing or anything. We just do it for ourselves. But
So in case you can't tell, we're more of a hangout per se.
well, right, dude.
for just,
And
like,
you
stuff
sound
we
like
enjoy
you
rather than a
read
focused episode sometimes. And
sounds
this
like
is,
you
one
read
of the
some
best.
comics too, there, Dustin.
Oh yeah, I definitely do. One of my favorites is Ibon Press. They do Lucio Fulci property comics,
Right.
and they're
That
pretty.
shit's
They're
fire.
pretty dank. Like I love them.
Right.
Sometimes you just want to like talk about what you read. I know fucking
Yeah, and like
Jake over there reads like a fair amount of manga too.
Yep.
There's people that would be up to speed with you in the group if we did it. And,
I think there's Terminator manga, isn't there? Like I seem to recall that being a thing at some point.
oh, there's
believe-
Terminator
believe it
comics
or
for
not,
days.
believe it or not, there are some African films that were made based on the Terminator.
I know there's like a Bollywood Nightmare on Elm Street, which seems difficult to track down, but you know I've got so many other things to
Or
watch
Something
anyway.
I've
it's
been
kinda
looking
like,
into more
I
of late.
recently, I recently heard there was a Bollywood version of Misery. I want to find that one.
Yeah, I need to see that
Oh,
so
my.
fucking bad.
All right.
But anyways,
Anyway, getting back to Terminator. So
my
here's where we
first,
are. We were on Jake.
Actually, yeah,
We
my
hit
first
Mo.
impressions, yeah.
Yeah.
Go
Your
ahead.
turn, Brandon. Go.
So, I actually have a fairly interesting history with Terminator. My father was like big into a lot of those films. He had an interesting past. I mean, he did a lot of cool stuff in college. He got to study martial arts under one of Bruce Lee's students. He was Golden Gloves, and he also did a lot of weightlifting. And he tended to like a lot of the action and adventure stuff that was associated with a lot of that stuff.
Eventually
So-
became a unionist too, if I remember right, and had
That
a
would've been
fair
my-
interest in that stuff.
That'd have been my grandfather. My father is a little bit more severe on the politics, but I think more. No, I'm not going to say. But
I definitely bought like a couple coal miner films because of your talk about your grandpa. I guess it was.
oh yeah, he was definitely a unionist.
Mhm.
So, as far as the Terminator, though, my father was always fascinated with Arnold.
Mhm.
And because of Mel Gibson's Mad Max, he also gained a lot of love for these post-apocalyptic type films, and got sucked into a lot of these films in the 80s, early 90s, like, Wet Wear, Rising Storm, Mad Max, a lot of films like this. So Terminator was not that far off the mark. It was, and he liked to show that on HBO when we had Dish for the first time. So we actually got to see the Terminator on HBO when it premiered for the first time.
Oh, sick.
And it was a really cool experience. I was really young, but it was a frightening experience for me as a younger child, and I could see how it would be a horror film. Of course, most things scared me back in those days.
Pussy.
But
No.
but that was the thing, Terminator was that kind of scary film for me. I mean, you have that bad guy there that Arnold played, and he was absolutely terrifying because he played it, and it could just be that his acting was really wooden, which could be. I saw Conan.
Dude, no, that guy fucking believed.
No, that was intentional.
I watched the
when I-
you saw the Arnie tape that I have for the making of Terminator, like in the chat. I watched that shit for this, and Arnold literally believed that in that scene where the fucking he scoops his eye out of his head or whatever, like we couldn't see the difference between that and his head. It's so funny to watch that part because it's like, no,
Very clearly fake.
Yeah, we did see the difference, like even immediately as
Yeah,
kids.
the effects have an awful lot of rough edges now, especially if you've seen it like 70 times, like I assume most people in their 30s have at this point.
It's not perfect. It has those moments.
They
where
do
it's
hold
like,
up very well. Like even Aliens, like I think
Yeah.
Aliens is an example of a movie with like perfect effects.
right.
And even there, like I see holes. Like there's a scene
They don't do
when
too
they're,
much
like-
with it, though.
Well,
Go ahead.
there's a scene
again.
there's a scene in Aliens where like when they're burning the hive and the queen is like thrashing around, like her head tilts up a little bit and you can see like the metal bar where the puppet's head like connects to the rest of the
Okay.
armature. Like everything has like a hole of some kind. Honestly, I wish they could like digital that out. Frankly, I would be okay with that. But
for being what they did with what they had, it's amazing when you think about stuff like that. That doesn't really,
yeah,
because you
Terminator-
wouldn't have noticed that as like an 8-year-old kid, dude.
Terminator's effects that don't hold up work better than that. Like their rough edges are kind of less rough. Like it's almost not like a blooper kind of thing. So
Right.
like, okay, I can tell that the T-100 is in the background. It's like I can tell this is a composite shot. It's not overtly. I can see the wires on this thing.
No,
So-
I feel you. It's just there is a couple of shots where it doesn't even really, like the eyeball. That's the one that's always been the biggest offender. I mean, that's why I think it's so hilarious that Arnie.
It does
defends it in
look
that
pretty.
one.
It does look
Like
pretty.
it's not
funny.
even good for the time period,
And
So-
there's that really obvious cut too.
Well, they didn't have as much funding for that particular film. I'm surprised they did as well as they did with what they had.
This was a
Dude,
studio movie,
there's
right?
like movies that have been made in people's backyards at that point that did a better eye gouge scene than that.
Well, even in Total Recall, Arnold Schwarzenegger took out his eye better in there, or took that thing out of his eye.
No, I mean that was like half a decade later. Though, but it is great, but it's like it could have been done better at the time. I think.
He was upset. He must have been upset afterwards, so he just practiced and practiced on his real eye the whole time. And
Okay.
and what you don't know is it's actually he's actually got a glass eye there because he had to just keep taking out his eye all the time.
Scooping it out, let it roll like a marble. Okay.
Well, there was another guy who had a marble for an eye that Arnold Schwarzenegger was in, and that was Last Action Hero. But shit,
I've never seen that.
Oh my god, it's great.
So for the longest time, so up until 2013, I didn't know Arnold was like a serious bodybuilder. Like I always thought he was just like a really buff actor. Like in 2013, 14-ish, like I started doing weightlifting myself. So the book I used was by Joe Manganiello, like Evolution. It had like an intro by Arnold. It talked about Arnold's movie like Pumping Iron, and it was like, oh, I didn't know he was like a
And then
legit
you learn about
thing.
like
Wow.
Arnold classics.
Yeah.
You
I
learn
didn't know
about
about any of it.
man.
bodybuilding part of it.
And
Yeah.
it's hard not to think about like watching this movie now, you know?
Well, there's certain points in it that are meant to showcase stuff like that too. Not so much in Terminator, but later on, and like I mean, obviously, like
in like T2,
the
they're a bit
badass-
more gratuitous with
yeah,
it.
or like Terminator or Predator when they do the badass like bro handshake, and it's just so that they can flex
son
their
of a
fucking
bitch.
arms. Like that shit
The
is
greatest
amazing.
meme.
But yeah, you know, fucking Arnie was a legit power builder. Like he was like one of those dudes that sculpted his whole physique to look like that. You know,
Yeah, when
And- it's kind of foreign idea to most of us that don't work out because I'm just gonna. I mean, I don't know. I'm a lazy fucking chubby drunk dude.
Just like Luke.
I'm gonna go ahead and
I mean,
wager
I like-
that most of us in this chat don't work out like that. You know,
I mean, I like doing it when I have the time. Like I always stick really close to Joe Manganiello's plan that he put forth in that book, because it kind of keeps me disciplined. And
there you go.
well, I had to have surgery last year, and so I was healthy enough to try working out again this year, and I got about a third as far as I usually do in about 3 times the time. Like I finished week 2 of the routine, like 2
But
weeks
you
late.
did it though.
Yeah, I did do it, and I did lose like 10 pounds again. Like the first time I did it, I used to be like 250, and so, thanks to Arnold, like through, inspiring Joe Manganiello to write this book, and putting some input into the workout routine, I lost like 50 pounds thanks to this guy. So, if you somehow are listening, thank you, Arnold, and Joe Manganiello.
And
I
just
liked
people in
Rampage, by
general,
the way.
you
It was
know,
cool.
You want to get in good shape, just get out there and start doing stuff again. When I started skating again for a while, I lost like 18 pounds in a month.
I love how we've digressed into bodybuilding now. But I do want to see Arnold's Pumping Iron movie after this now. Like, I think that would be a good follow-up.
Yeah.
Hercules in New York.
Hmm?
Hercules in New York.
Oh, that was another kind of thing, too. Like, at this point, like, we've seen Arnold's Terminator, like, with the full, like salt and pepper beard. And it was kind of weird seeing Arnold, like, so young in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It
So
was
it's
a little bit.
Well,
I mean,
the
I
last
grew
time
up on this shit, so Terminator 1 to me is like a sequence of events that I already know about. I've watched this so many fucking times. It's nuts.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen it for at least a couple of years. Like we
See,
saw
yeah.
T2. I saw T2 the other week, so I'm used to him, being kind of older in that. But here, I mean, he's still. You can tell he's definitely like younger.
Where, like I watch if I get drunk enough on a Saturday night, I'm pretty much gonna watch Terminator 2.
Well, that's
something.
how we did it the other week. Like we had Friendsgiving at a friend's house.
You always are having it in that way, and then there's obviously times throughout the year if you're a fan of the comics and extended stuff that you eventually have an excuse to just watch Terminator 1 and 2. They might be among the most watched movies in my entire history of watching movies, dude. Like,
Do they have a good 4K release yet?
maybe. I feel like
I know if they do. Because I know on the Predator 4K release, they kind of phoned it in. Like, I have the Alien 4K, but I haven't watched it yet.
it's not really much different. Like a lot of those, it's not really much different from just getting
Like they didn't even
DVD versions.
Like they didn't even remaster it from what I'm guessing they just like upscaled it and didn't like rescan it or anything.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so it's just them trying to get your fucking Skrilla.
The plot of Terminator.
The plot of
No.
Terminator is apparently we have a cyborg that lands in where would we say that this was located? New York?
This
This is LA. Like they say it's LA. You know what? I'm just gonna take over.
Yeah.
So the premise of this movie is So in the future, machines have attempted to exterminate humanity, and after a long, difficult struggle, eventually humanity prevails. However, the machines have one final play up their sleeve. They send an assassin robot, the Terminator, back in time to kill the leader of the Resistance before he's born, and thus prevent the Resistance from ever happening. And so two people are sent back, well, two beings are sent back from the future. So there's the Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, this huge, intimidating buff dude. And there's Kyle Reese, who's a Resistance fighter who's been sent back by John Connor to protect his mother from the Terminator. And at first, it doesn't really give you a whole lot of... It doesn't really explain who Reese is, like, right away. So you see the Terminator materialize in the modern day, and then shortly afterward, you see Reese. And whereas the Terminator immediately kills people for their clothes, you see Reese kind of sneaking around, like, taking what he needs without really trying to hurt anybody. So he does have to, like, rough some cops up, but you get kind of an idea that he's a good guy, but you don't really know a lot about him right away. And I thought that was kind of a nice touch to kind of lead some
mystery,
ambiguity. Yeah,
right. And like in the fucking
Cloak and
Bunch
Dagger
tape that I watched, they talk about how it like kind of makes him also a villain almost at first,
because you don't know who he is or what he's doing.
Exactly, you're not sure what he's doing, and he's doing some kind of villainous, or bad stuff.
Well, because he's stealing stuff. He's taking guns from cops. What year is it? And it's like, oh shit, is this guy nuts too? What's going on?
I mean, to me, it's fairly obvious that he's the good guy and the Terminator's the bad guy. Even as a kid, when I was watching it, that came through good.
I've shown this to a couple people, and you'd be surprised. Like some younger people don't quite pick up on that right away. Mm-hmm. Like I think I even had one person say, "It's like, oh, is he a Terminator too?" And it's like, just watch it.
You'll get it eventually.
Excuse me, you son of a bitch.
What's happening here? Anyways, after he gets chased by the cops, he and the Terminator are kind of looking for where Sarah Connor is hiding under. And
Sarah Connor is John Connor, the Resistance leader's mother. And so the Terminator finds a phone book and he looks up Sarah Connor, and there are 3 of them. So he just goes down the list and is killing every Sarah Connor. And there's a really good tension set up in there. Like at first, like her coworkers call her and it's like, "Hey Sarah, come check this out. You're on TV." It's like, "What?" It's like, "You're dead." Haha. And she's like, And then like the second murder happens and it's like, oh, wait a minute, somebody's And there's a lot of good tension, like when she has that realization, like she's out. I think she'd just gotten back from the movies or whatever. She's at like some bar and the news story comes on, the next victim, Sarah Connor and she's like, wait, turn that up. And there's a long sequence where she's kind of like, like looking over her shoulder, and there's some really good like horror tension in this stretch of the movie.
Well, another character that shows up in here is one of the detectives, Lance Henriksen. Now, you said that Arnold Schwarzenegger looks young in here. Me, I'm looking at Lance, thinking, "Oh my God, he looks young." I mean, Lance to me.
Lance Henriksen will always be like a staple of my.
I met Lance Henriksen in person at Flashback Weekends this year, and he pretty much looks exactly like that.
Yep.
Like Lance Henriksen has, if he's somehow listening, sorry, but like Lance Henriksen has always looked old, but that exact same age of old.
Yeah, you're exactly Crypt Keeper old or some shit. Like you.
Well, I don't know about. He's always looked like he's 50. Like even 40 years ago, he looked like he was 50, and now he looks like he's 50. It's like it's like a witch's curse kind of thing. It's like, okay, you won't age past this point. but you'll
He's
still
just going
see.
to keep making Bigfoot movies, no matter what anybody says.
So it's sort of like Jamie
a lot
Lee
of them,
Curtis, how she looks way old for teenage stuff in Halloween, but then she hit a certain
She
age
looks
and
like
she just
30 in
stopped
Halloween.
aging.
Yeah.
Then she just stopped aging in general, and she looks the same as she did like 20 years ago.
It's weird.
I'm trying to think of somebody. Unlike Keanu Reeves, who actually made a deal with that witch and looks exactly the same as he did in Bill and Ted.
Steve Martin. Yeah, but yeah, I want to look something up real quick that I'm curious about.
I don't know. He looks more haggard than he did in Bill and Ted, but that's
Well, I mean, he looks more tired, but I mean, my point of reference is seeing him in John Wick, and it's like, well, yeah, he just shot all those guys. Of course, he looks tired.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that that Lieutenant Ed Traxler in here, played by Paul Winfield, Winfield, he played in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which was on earlier today. So seeing him there and seeing him a little bit fatter in face here.
Well, talk about someone who looks a little young. The punks that the Terminator goes up against.
Oh yeah,
Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton is one of the punks. I had forgotten about that.
He is.
with his
He
Sonic
just has
the
the worst
Hedgehog hair.
luck with. He just has the worst luck with sci-fi monsters. Like, I mean, he gets killed by the Predator in Predator 2. He gets killed by the aliens in Aliens, and he gets killed by the Predator in this one. In the
Some people just
Terminator.
die
In
well.
Terminator.
And am I remembering correctly that he goes down with the ship on Titanic?
Does he? Yeah.
He is in most.
Does he survive
films.
Twister? I don't remember that.
Oh, I don't remember that. I feel like he did.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, but yeah, they're definitely. You're talking about the ages and whatever, and especially you were talking about Jamie Lee Curtis looking a little old. It is notable that Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, is supposed to be 18 in this movie. Kyle Reese is supposed to be like 21,
No.
and they're both were like 27 when they made the movie. Like
yeah.
Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn were both like 27. It was like, yeah, you don't
Really?
quite look your age.
I mean, they definitely look older than that to me. But maybe that has to do with, like, my perception of human ages has always been, like, really kind of crummy. Like, if I perceive somebody, like, as an adult, like,
Right.
I tend to greatly overestimate, like, their age. Whereas if somebody's, like, really immature, I tend to underestimate.
Well, then, based on that, what would you say all of our ages here in the fucking?
I would have said Dave's 40, since he's the one I've seen the most in person. And I would have said like 45 for Brandon and Jake.
Damn.
And
Really?
I don't think I've actually seen like a picture of you, Mo. But I would guess like 35.
Yeah.
Wow.
Actually,
Well, hey, it could be worse. You know, I used to work at an animal shelter, and you know, one of my coworkers was like, "How old do you think our boss is?" And I was like, "I don't know, 37." And she was like, "Oh my God, she's 22."
Well, how old are you?
37.
And then she was like, "How old do you think I am?" 30? I'm 19. And I like look at her, like, are you sure? Jesus.
Yeah,
well, how old are you, dude?
I turned 32 the other week.
Yeah, we're the same age.
I'm a monstrosity.
We like dumb shit sometimes.
I don't know. When I was 28, I was having people think I was 17. Like I tend to look very young. Maybe it's just my immaturity that makes me seem young. I don't know.
Well, I'm
Sucks either
35, but I look 40. So.
Well, apparently I look 45, but I'm actually only 40.
I've been buying 40s from the same place for most of my life, and I can't remember ever being carded. So I guess I looked like a piece of shit. Like when I was fucking like 17. No one cared.
Or they're a really shitty place that doesn't card very well.
Well, a
Weirdly.
lot of places that carry 40s don't really pay much attention.
I used to go to a place that I know didn't card very well. I would not consider them very good quality, though.
So, We are back.
What do we think about the character of Linda Hamilton?
So Sarah Connor has a lot of Sarah Connor is such like a great like heroine character because like she starts out just like a normal person. Like she doesn't have anything particularly like special about her, but you know, surviving the encounter with the Terminator kind of brings out her inner strength. And by the end of the movie, you know, she's fighting the thing head on. Like she's saving Greece.
Well, she's Survivor Girl. But
and it really carries over into T2 like so perfectly. Like she becomes kind of extreme survivalist, but
she has like that. I don't know. When they're attacking that black dude's house, I have a hard time agreeing with her. Where it's like,
well, she's kind of in a frenzy at that point. Like the knowledge of like what's going to happen if that guy finishes his research, like just drives her insane.
That's why we have to have that fucking scene where the dude who plays her kid is like, squeal, stop.
Yeah. I actually think
I
that
can't even fucking imitate it.
That was loud. God damn.
I mean, it was really. I think that the idea of showing her as she is now is kind of cool when you think about it, especially with the badass that she becomes. Well, in the second movie, which you can see at the end, but up until then, you definitely look at it and you go, probably this is not. She's probably not a badass. But again, she's supposed to be a 19-year-old, and most 19-year-olds in the 80s just wanted to have fun, do a little coke, and party.
I was trying to do that well into my 30s.
She was working in a restaurant in the film, right? So
yeah, the waitress.
Yeah, I've worked with plenty of 19-year-olds who work in restaurants, and most of them are not thinking about serious things yet.
Well, okay, if we're going back and talking about the first movie,
or trying to be serious waitresses,
boiled down into like your ultimate sci-fi thriller. You know, you got the chick that is supposed to not get killed. You got the dude that's trying to like kill the chick, and then you got the dude that's trying to stop the dude from killing the chick that's supposed to be killed.
And of course, you've got the guns who never run out of bullets.
And you got all the others.
Reload a few times.
And actually, you're talking about that, though. That does bring up a good point that I was reading about today that I found very interesting. What is it? Is a Soldier of Fortune, I think, is the magazine that actually complimented Arnold on his performance. They said that they apparently have made a practice of trashing movies for the way guns are used. But they were like, well, he used guns like a man who's actually using guns.
Apparently, that's pretty fucking rad, honestly.
Yeah. And he did. He apparently did spend months training so that he could use the guns in a robotic, like, what am I trying to say? Like an automatic.
With that efficiency.
Yeah, that efficient. That's a good way to put it.
Like, look how he looked like he knew what he was doing. Yeah.
Right.
First off, who else could pull off that first initial scan that he does when you first see him? He just looks side to side, and you know
anybody. I mean, really, but. To me, that's the funniest thing about all the behind the scenes stuff is the stuff where Arnold's like, you can't tell the difference between in the fucking. It's like, dude, you totally can. I don't know why you're continually doubling down on this, but
I think this was the first.
I just imagine like whoever's recording the interview, recording that commentary. You know, Arnold's like, "Wow, you can barely tell it's an effect," and the guy wants to be, like. Well, I mean, you can definitely tell. And then, like, Arnold is standing up for this, and he is like, wow, you are really tall. Yeah, you can't tell, man. It's good.
Yeah, the response to that, if it wasn't positive, was kept to the cutting room floor sort of thing. Yeah.
It looks like we lost one.
Like, I mean, I had kind of a similar experience. I was at some con and I met Lou Ferrigno and Kevin Sorbo. And I wanted to ask, like, Kevin Sorbo, it's like, why do you do all these terrible Christian movies? Like, don't you have some dignity? And, like, he stood up and he was like, hey, I'm Kevin Sorbo. And he's, like, 2.5 feet taller than me. And I was like, wow, you are really tall. And it's like, yeah, great work. Shake his hand, please.
Yeah, I kind of wonder that myself. But, you know.
It's like, I mean, money is awesome, I guess, but...
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to think I have, there's a, I took a Gothic novel class in undergrad and we spent a lot of our time talking about like vampire movies because we were reading vampire novels. And the story was that Christopher Lee refused to do some of the Hammer Draculas that were like Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires because he, quote, felt it was beneath his dignity. And I find myself kind of coming back to that phrase a lot. I felt it was beneath my dignity.
So
really hope you're going to say Hot Topic cut a deal with Cradle of Filth to produce a couple albums there, because now that I'm left with no excuse for those, this makes me like that band a little bit more.
So along those lines, then, how would y'all like to be like the interviewer, like interviewing Arnold about, let's say, Jingle All the Way or Kindergarten Cop or something like that?
Oh man, that would be epic! Like, oh man, like, what were you thinking? Like, what did you think when you first got this script? Were you actually like, what the fuck is this, or were you like into it? Like,
well, it's funny you mentioned Kindergarten Cop because evidently they're going back to it.
Oh man, like,
I feel like if me and Dave like did that, we'd ask about it, and then eventually it would turn into us just at Denny's.
Well, even like I was gonna say, even the movies that Arnold's in that aren't necessarily like the best movies per se, or like not. Or that have like the weirdest premises, like they're all still enjoyable. Like,
yeah,
like he basically saves Batman and Robin from just being like torture.
I don't know about that. I still haven't brought myself to watch that all the way through.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if there's
have
much
enough
to
beers,
saving it.
and you're just watching it, and he's like, chill, and it's like, yeah, fuck him up.
Now, I'll admit, of the three villains they eviscerated for that film, his was probably the most entertaining from what I've seen.
Because I mean, if they were gonna be like cast to type, that we would have had to have like Steve Buscemi, Mr. Freeze, just like sad, depressed Mr. Freeze.
Actually, I see if they really wanted to nail it, I could see that be like Edward Norton or something.
John Malkovich as Mr. Freeze. Yeah,
exactly. Oh, he'd be a
I
good.
could have seen him.
But okay, so on casting, I'm just going to throw this out because this made me crack up. Talking about weird casting stuff. This was one of the things on IMDb. O.J. Simpson was considered for the Terminator, but the producers feared he was too nice to be taken seriously as a cold-blooded killer. In 1990, before his trial, Dark Horse Comics printed issues using his likeness.
So you guys got to remember how fucking loved the Juice was back then.
Right.
Oh yeah.
That's one of those things that's in a way out of our cultural concept because.
No,
Well,
I mean, maybe David is old enough.
I remember the Naked Gun movies, and he was definitely the doofy, nice guy in those movies.
Right. And so, how did O.J. Simpson even get included in stuff like that?
Because he was in Roots.
He exactly. He was like
he was in Roots
of American Consoles.
Okay,
American
I remember.
family.
It's been a long time since I've seen Roots.
The evil part of me can't help but think it's hilarious. They thought he couldn't play a killer.
It was so intense.
How about doing a movie about how he could have done it?
Oh,
There we go.
Well,
What do they call that? The glove doesn't fit? I mean, I don't.
the Chewbacca defense.
No
No one cares. That's the thing anymore. Like most of us fucking that were that old remember the car chase with him in that stupid white Suburban more than we remember the actual case. Yeah.
And
I still fall into the category where it's like if you're gonna lead cops on a chase in a white Suburban, then you might as well go balls out and like fucking take it on the beach and like some
Now, granted, what time of year was that? That was in the autumn, right?
Something like that.
If
you're fucking on the last Jeep ride of your life like that,
if you're trying to do a car chase in a white Suburban and you're doing it this time of year, you get away from it.
Go action Bronco.
Cops are gonna get stuck at like the first time there's fucking a good amount of powder.
No, you have no idea.
Oh man, I love how we keep just getting off on tangents. This is Arnold's fault somehow.
Well,
it's too awesome. And there's so much connected with this movie. Like this movie is.
Jake has something he needs to say.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, someone who's worked in a Christmas tree lot, I guarantee you could easily disappear in a Christmas tree lot if you were driving a Suburban.
Excuse me?
You could.
Well, no, I was just going to comment how, when we think about the Terminator, like it seems to like really like bring out all of these, 80s and early 90s like references. Like, it's very much like an 80s frame of mind kind of movie.
References.
And that's, it seems to be where it's putting us. Just, it's like, remember the Terminator, and then remember like all these things that happened kind of around the Terminator,
So our member berries, essentially.
Pretty much, yeah.
Member, yeah. No, but it reminded me very strongly when I was watching this film, because again, it's been a few years since I've seen it, and I didn't make this connection before somehow. But like when we, I think it was last month where we covered Scream, and of course I rewatched all of those. And you have the sequel discussion in Scream 2 where they talk about T2 is the better, And then you had Randy's, are you Sarah Connor? Yes. Bam.
And then they kill Randy like assholes.
I thought that was just Randy just mocking the film. But then I was like, holy crap, there actually is...
Never forgive, never forget.
I forgot there was that exact scene in the movie. So I was like, okay. So he's mocking it and also paying homage at the same time. I was like, that's kind of fun.
Well, I mean, with Arnold, a lot of the stuff, you could actually pay homage to a lot of his work.
Yeah.
I remember one thing I went and did when I was... one of the like handful of times I've actually been out to California. I remember going to Venice Beach and making the mistake of thinking, well, what was it? Santa Monica looks like it's an easy walk. And and it was a very long walk, but it was a very interesting walk. And one of the places I got to pass was a part of Arnold's history because I got to actually see the Muscle Beach, both the new Muscle Beach that they had and the older one. And you can't help but go back and bring yourself back in time and think to see yourself back in those days when he was actually working out on the beach, trying to make things go, not just as a professional bodybuilder, but just as an actor. And, during those days, he was still probably working out near that area at the time. So it's just kind of cool to actually bring yourself back to those days and look at that level of stuff there. Actually, aren't you, were you
on an Uber star?
Yeah, before he was an Uber star. I mean, that's what he did. He worked out there. He hung out with his fellow bodybuilders and eventually worked towards becoming one.
Mm-hmm.
It was it is kind of cool to see these things as they start out. Mm-hmm. For me, that just happened by chance for the fact that I decided, that Ferris wheel looks a lot closer than it really is. It looks like just a couple miles. Instead, it was like over 10.
So, getting back to the movie, where we're at in the plot is He's so he
So the Terminator has started looking for Sarah Connors by just ripping a page of the phone book and following them down the line, and we get this really intense scene where he goes for the first Sarah Connor, and it's very to the point and very direct. Like he just knocks on the door. Are you Sarah Connor? Yeah. Kicks in the door. Blam blam blam, and it's like, oh shit. And that's really our first serious piece of action in this. Kind of know like. It kind of like sets up what we're going to see. And we don't see the second Sarah Connor murder, but we can kind of guess how that went from the news report that we get and just seeing that scene. Like it kind of saves you some time because you don't have to go, harder on more exposition.
Mm-hmm.
That's true enough.
I don't know. If you skip parts of this, it's gonna make it fucked up. It is fucked up to begin with.
But you
So-
did have the scene before that in the gun store where he was going to get his arsenal together, and that was kind of an interesting little.
Yeah,
scene.
we got a Dick Miller appearance there. Yeah,
That
as
that
a
one
gun shop
there,
owner.
that's actually a very dated thing because there's no way that arsenal level would be sold today
Nope.
in that gun
No.
store. But back in those days, yes, you could even get automatic weapons back in those days.
Mhm.
So it wasn't, I believe, until Reagan that they outlawed the assault rifles and stuff like that, which is kind of funny if you think about it.
He did tell him there was a waiting period on some of the guns, but
Yeah.
Arnold was like,
You
"No,
get the handguns in 2 weeks. It's like, which ones are you taking? All. Hey, you can't load those shells. Boom. It's like,
yeah,
well, I mean, we all saw it coming,
yeah." You
Yeah.
don't tell the customer what they can't do. The customer is always right.
Right. No, wrong.
Yeah. I did wasn't there one? I think he asked for one
So-
thing that I just looked at him like,
Plasma rifle, 40-watt range, and the dude's like,
Yeah. No, we don't carry that.
fucking plasma rifle.
So ultimately,
That's why you shot.
while Arnold Schwarzenegger is trying to kill all of the Sarah Connors in town, or in the city of LA, Reese is actually
Reese is shadowing Sarah. Because
and he's
the thing with
shadowing her
Terminator
pretty-
is, even though it's a robot, like it looks human, so he has to wait for it to come after her before he can tell, what the Terminator looks like.
oh, actually, by the way, I'm going to say one of the bigger miracle exceptions in this film, one of the stranger bits of suspension of disbelief. I can't believe there are only 3 Sarah Connors in all of LA. Yeah, I actually worked with a Sarah Connor. It's not an uncommon name. Oh well. You would have thought.
Yeah,
I
so
guess they
apparently
did it
there's
for budgetary reasons, probably.
Well, and you never know. No, there might have been in the '80s only 3 Sarah Connors. You never know.
Yeah, I
So-
That's
guess
what I was thinking too.
maybe
But,
they were all Tiffany's at that time.
well, yeah, breakfast at Tiffany's kind of thing. Yeah. Anyways,
More likely, maybe music didn't care and hoped he wouldn't. Yeah. So
But anyways, Reese ultimately, after a little bit, gets caught by the police, which they ultimately think that he's correct. What did you think about that interview that Reese had? Or am I going out of order?
To get to Reese's interview, so Sarah sees the newscast and she goes to a nightclub to try to find some safety, like in public.
Mhm.
And so while she's there, the Terminator shows up at the nightclub, and the Terminator almost gets her there, But then Reese, who's been shadowing her, like kind of pops out and like blasts the Terminator, like stunning it for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we get like the famous line, "Come with me if you want to live."
Mm.
Which was
And-
regurgitated in Capper.
Oh yeah, well it's a pretty famous line, so they reused it in some of the other Terminators.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, all those big action ones, they gotta have a that sort of it's sort of
Catchphrase.
like a catchphrase that gets, like with this one it's that one and I'll be back, it's like, but like, in the Star Wars I got a bad feeling about this, that sort of thing. The little lines that get reused here and there. They're good times.
You know what I like? Like Arnold's character as Terminator, he had the option to. There was this one scene where he pulled up an itinerary area, what to say to the landlord dude, and it said something like "go fuck yourself" or some shit like that. And, on his fuck up asshole.
There's like a readout of like human responses to.
Yeah, it was almost like it's sort of like a simulator or some
A
sort of
HUD.
thing.
The Terminator has a HUD. But anyway, so we get our action sequence at the nightclub. So where there's a shootout between Reese and the Terminator, and Reese is able to escape with Sarah, and he kind of lays out what's going on. So this is the first scene where we have like exposition for what's really happening in this movie. And it's like, I'm from the future, the Terminator's from the future. He tells about John Connor, he tells about why the Terminator's after her. And she doesn't believe him at first, but after she sees the Terminator take some definitely lethal to a human like attacks, she seems a lot more inclined to believe. So, and eventually, after they have like another run-in with the Terminator, like that whole scene where he jumps in their car, he punches through their window. Like eventually, they're able to shake him, but they get arrested in the process. And so they're at the police station and they're questioning Reese, and they're basically questioning Reese on his story. It's like, oh, so if the Terminator is a machine, how can it come through? Like, why couldn't you just bring like a plasma rifle? Like, they're being assholes about it.
Nah.
Well, I mean, the thing I always found as a detriment to this scene is this guy is trained. He knows what's what. He's supposed to be that guy that comes back. And yet, they look at it and he doesn't think to himself, like, they ain't going to believe this. So instead of coming up with a believable story, he just goes straight for the batshit insane story.
I mean,
that to me, I mean, they ain't going to believe that stuff. You know that. I know that. He should know that.
I got the feeling Reese didn't particularly care either way, though. Because it's like, I have this mission to do, and, you're just in my way.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do. But I think it was more likely a fucking grip of performances that were meant to be private.
So
Yeah, well, anyway, so the Terminator eventually comes to the police station. That's when we get that line. It's like, I'm a friend of Sarah Connor's. Where is she? It's like, you can't see her right now. And he checks out like the defenses in the room. I'll be back. It's like everybody's favorite line. And then he rams a car in there, like to break into the police station, and we get like this insane massacre. It's like, these cops are so bad at firefights. It's just like, hey, I heard a noise. Oh, I'm dead.
and
It's kind of uncharitable, I suppose, but still.
Well,
the
see,
one
that's
cop
the
like, stay here.
fun line.
The one detective is like, stay here. I'll go see what's up. And Lance is like, watch him. I'll go check this. The kind of thing.
I'll be right back.
Right. The famous
Scream
line.
reference.
and he's got this
Yeah.
one shotgun that just goes blam, 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 just blowing guys
so
away.
we get a spectacular shootout where the Terminator is just dual wielding assault rifles and shotguns, and we see him shoot like 40 cops. Like, it's insane. So this is kind of like our big money shot action moment. So the movie, I mean, does have kind of breaks between the action, but it's mostly just crazy action scenes. Like, not as crazy as in T2. Like, the action scenes in this movie are definitely more grounded than in T2. Does anybody else
Yeah.
have that impression?
Oh, I mean, I think the action's pretty darn awesome. They did great choreography for the action. As far as movies go for that, it is a really awesome way of displaying both the horror and the, just in the straightforward kick-ass style of that we know Arnold for in the future.
Like, the action, I guess what I meant is the action is kind of more quick and dirty rather than like fancy, because in T2, like when he's fighting the T-1000, they're throwing each other around,
Yeah.
and like, like holes in walls, and whereas this, it's just like, gunplay, except
It's a little more
one guy can't go down.
Mhm.
It's not over the top, is what you're saying.
Exactly, yeah.
My problem with T2 is I just keep hearing in my head, please report to the principal's office.
Well, actually, that's a good question if you think about it. With T2, a lot of people consider that like the end-all be-all, though I've always liked this movie better. I don't know what it is. I'm in the minority because most people prefer the sequel because it's got a wider appeal. To me,
It was kind of more of what you like about this movie, like in terms of action and like stuff that happens.
I'm just, I'm more, I guess, though normally I would say I'm more of a horror fan, but that wouldn't be true. But I do like horror as a genre, and I actually consider this much more of a horror film than the second one. The second one, I feel like it's more of a just by-the-numbers action film. It's done well, but I felt like the other one has more originality to it, and it's just a lot more intense to me.
I feel like Arnold's character as the Terminator is a hell of a lot more darker in tone in this particular case, because you
Definitely.
see once he puts on those dark cop glasses, then you get that maniac cop feel. Somewhat. And when he's driving next to them, you almost don't feel like it's Arnold. You feel like it's the Terminator. And
he sells it really well.
He's just
Actually, one of my favorite stories from this movie is when they were working on like casting him. Like, he just appeared. He appeared at like the producer's office or something, like in character as the Terminator, and the secretary was scared like so bad she thought like her boss owed money to the mob, and they had like sent this guy. Pretty epic.
Well,
sounds
I
like a
mean,
good
that's
story.
I think that is the gist of it, though. I feel like Arnold is legit scary in this one on many levels, whereas I feel like he plays it off much better as a villain than as a hero. I think it's cool that they change it up, but I really feel like the original does hold that just awesome place.
Well, he is supposed to be the Terminator that is supposed to kill Sarah Connors. So it's just he ends up not being the Terminator that does. So they send another one in its set, and then another one. It's just at least until the job is done. It's kind of one of those things where he just ends up being the last model that tried. But I personally like this one more just because you don't often get to see Arnold Schwarzenegger as a bad guy. He's often playing a good guy.
This was certainly one of the first. Where
and nowadays, yeah.
I mean, the last time that I saw him play a bad guy was, I believe, in Escape Plan, where he actually played a fellow prisoner that was kind of a bad guy with a really bad mustache. So,
Escape Plan. I actually enjoyed that. That was with Stallone, wasn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just run through that Futurama episode. Professor Farnsworth, what was your overall business plan? I keep it right here, and he hands him the folder. And the guy looks it over. It's like, this is an escape plan. And then he looks up, and the professor's gone.
Oh, you're talking. Was it? No, never mind. No. It is also worth noting that this was basically Cameron's first film, really, where he was at
In
the
charge.
helm. Yeah. I did not realize he apparently was fired from Piranha 2.
I asked
Man.
because I wasn't sure, because I knew he did Piranha 2.
Yeah.
And,
obviously,
I like
Cameron's
Piranha
best
2.
film.
Well, in interviews,
James Cameron's best.
He still says it's the best killer flying fish movie ever made. And the joke is that it's the only killer flying fish movie ever made. But I like it. I really do. Like, I think I like it a bit more than the first Piranha, honestly.
I
love
like
Piranha 2. It's a classic.
I actually like all of the Piranhas put together. I mean, I think.
I'm pretty sure I could get. I'm pretty sure I could get the writer of Piranha 3D on the show. He's pretty much agreed. He's agreed to do something like
I
that.
saw that one.
He's a pretty good. He's a pretty cool dude. Josh Stolberg. He did the Saw movies too.
So
the editor of this. Go ahead.
I was going to say, apparently, certain aspects of this film were very much grew out of that particular experience. Because I don't remember all the exact particulars, and I'm not sure where it is on IMDb. But they said something about he was fired from Piranha 2, but he still wanted to have a hand in the editing at least. He wanted to, kind of not have his name on something that he couldn't guide to the end, I guess you could say. So he used all his money to fly to Italy, and he didn't leave enough for living expenses, and apparently got very, very sick. And apparently the image of the legless metal Terminator dragging itself across the floor was straight out of a fever dream that he had.
Nice.
Yeah. And then he kind of worked from there. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of a fun origin there. But,
what's funny is that some things have come from dreams in general. I mean, the original story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was from a fever dream that the writer had, and he threw it away. And his wife was like, "Hey, this is really good. You should write something on it." learning
Actually, my
Stephen King's. Stephen King used to do a dream and nightmare journal by his bed. Actually, he might still do that. He said he used to get a lot of his short stories from those particular sources.
well, and if I'm remembering
Funny you should
correctly, the first episode I did with you guys, Mother, I do believe Darren Aronofsky claimed that was the origin of that film, that he had sort of a fever dream. So.
Fever dream.
Yeah, that sounds like what Mother was.
There was some fever in there. Yeah.
Actually, fever is the best way of describing Aronofsky, I would guess.
Weird movie.
Oh, it was interesting. Yeah.
But anyway, so
Mm-hmm.
after they escape from the police station, they manage to evade the Terminator for a while, and so we get some kind of character development moments between Sarah and Reese,
Mm-hmm.
and they have kind of a relationship start to form, and they even, big
fact,
spoiler twist, they conceive John Connor.
Yeah.
Because earlier in the movie, she's like, do they know who his dad is? And it's like, well, I know he dies before. You know what? Don't tell me.
I actually don't
John
remember them
dies
having
at the
that
end.
much- I actually don't remember them having that much of a love scene, but they actually did have kind of a love scene there. So.
It's a short love scene, but it's very tender. So it's one of the better love scenes just in movies in general. Like it just kind of happens, and like you believe it. Like the way it's shot, like
Oh wow.
It feels real, I guess is the way I would put it.
Okay, I'm looking at this cast list of people considered for the Terminator. I could see Ron Perlman or Stephen Lang. Maybe
Nice.
Alec Baldwin.
Oh yeah, Ron Perlman definitely. I could see that.
I don't think I could see Chevy Chase or Michael Keaton.
Oh, Chevy Chase as the Terminator.
Are you fucking serious? He's just telling jokes. It's like, hey, I'm here to kill you. I don't know what Chevy Chase jokes are. Most of Chevy Chase jokes are just like looking
or
awkward.
Maybe he'd show up naked. He
looking
he would
confused.
probably,
No, he probably walked through the movie with a look similar to what he looks like in Christmas Vacation when things have gone south and he's on bad shit.
He's just revving the chainsaw.
Yes.
It's like, you okay, Dad? Wrong. Good talk.
Yes.
He has that look in his eye.
Well,
That's my favorite line in that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, Frank Sinatra was originally tagged to play Dirty Harry, so what can you do,
Well, actually, Sylvester Stallone was considered for Kyle Reese, so you could have had
Actually, that would have been cool. I could have seen that. That would have been awesome.
early Stallone. Yeah.
I believe Kyle Reese more with like Michael Biehn
Yeah.
rather than some like super muscly like uber soldier from the future. Like Kyle Reese is like a very like he's not he's kind of a regular looking guy. You know what I mean?
Oh, and I also like this.
Like you're not sure if he could actually defeat the Terminator. Whereas it's like, oh, it's Stallone. It's this huge buff dude.
I disagree. Stallone may be buff, but if you put him up against Arnold in his prime, he still looks like... Actually, pretty much, it's like putting any wrestler at the time against Andre the Giant. It's you're not going to really get the most what was the word? You're not going to get somebody that's going to say, oh yeah, well obviously that other wrestler is easily able to take on Andre the Giant. It's the same thing. It's Arnold's just so huge. It really didn't matter who they'd put him up against.
Well, they also list here Mickey Rourke and Bruce Willis as potentials. That would have been interesting. But
wow.
I like the Clerks connection here. Rick Rossovich would later appear with Michael Biehn and Bill Paxton in Navy SEALs.
Hey, I'm gonna be right back. We gotta get to the finale pretty soon, though.
Right.
definitely.
Yeah. So, what point were we at plot-wise?
They all
we're
died.
just after the love scene.
Okay. So then they go up against Donald again.
Well, they end up after the love scene. They end up somehow in this factory, if I remember correctly.
Well, that was after they had encountered him and blowed him up and whatnot.
Or tried to.
Before that, we should also talk about Arnold had found out where they were by calling her or calling
Or
what was it?
having her. She had called her mom or something like
He
that.
had called her mother, yes, and he had used her voice to trick her, and then he immediately calls back the hotel and it's like, "Where are you?" You know, it's like, yeah, she kind of goofed on that one, but
Yeah, well, I mean, she doesn't understand it. She thinks she's talking to her parents at the time.
right. But she had been warned not to contact anyone. You know how that is. Whenever you warn someone not to talk to anyone, that they're going to talk to someone. I mean, that's like movie rule there. But yeah, and then so there were like these. They got in. Oh, that's what it was. It was they somehow got in sort of an auto chase. Where he was driving this tanker. They put a flash bomb under it.
That's right. He taught her how to make nitroglycerin bombs.
Then they put a banana in the exhaust pipe.
Well, but yeah. So yeah, that's what it was. They made the high explosives. You know, the high explosives. Yes, not low explosives. And actually, yeah.
You mean the ones with clouds of smoke that didn't go boom?
I'll bet Kyle and what's his name, Gummer probably would have gotten along just fine. You
know. What did you think about those homemade bombs, Mo?
Well, I thought they were kind of a cool touch. He's like, I gotta go get some supplies, and he shakes all that stuff out, and she's like, oh, what are we having for dinner? Plastique. Oh, what's that? Nitroglycerin based, but it's a bit more stable.
Right.
Like, that's a really memorable line that I enjoy.
Right.
I keep thinking of Tremors because we watched that last week, and
because like the Bert's bombs.
That's what I say. He and Bert would have gotten along just fine.
Yeah, Bert could hunt Terminators.
Yes. He would have enjoyed it too.
Could he have been a Terminator though?
Could he have been one?
Yeah, Bert.
Yeah, I guess.
Bert the
I could see an evil Terminator Bert. That would be interesting.
Michael Gross is the Terminator. God damn.
Well, they keep putting out new ones. So
the Terminator versus Tremors. No.
Well, you see, you want to do the Terminator somebody unassuming, so automatically you're supposed to cast Carrot Top as the Terminator.
There we
go. I have actually heard that Carrot Top is quite formidable as an opponent. He's actually quite adept at martial arts.
There was some roast. I can't remember whose roast it was. I think it was like roast of Charlie Sheen or something, where it was like the first time Carrot Top had really been out in the public eye for a while, and he was just unbelievably buff. It's like,
oh yeah.
He looked almost a little bit like Arnold. Like his arms were huge, and people were kind of commenting on it a lot. It's like, wow, what the hell happened to you? And because of the way those roasts work, everybody takes a shot at everybody else. And like, I like how Carrot Top started as like, first of all, fuck all you people.
Carrot Top as the Terminator, that would be like Joel David Moore's character in Grandma's Boy.
I don't know if you're going with the idea of someone who's completely unassuming as the Terminator, like just no one would suspect them.
John
Yeah.
Lovitz.
What's that?
John Lovett's Terminator. Sure, what the hell not?
Boom.
That's just great. I was thinking more like Jay Baruchel or Michael. What's his name? Michael Cera or something.
Michael Cera Terminator. He's just like awkward and sweaty.
Yeah, it's Michael Cera versus God. What was his name? The guy who plays Lex Luthor.
Oh, Jesse Eisenberg.
Jesse.
Yes,
whatever.
Jesse Eisenberg versus Michael Cera.
Get that he played him. That one.
Yeah.
Oh God, that was awful.
Yeah, that was a bad movie.
Yeah.
Holy
Well, that was a bad move. Oh. But anyway.
They gave him like the Carrot Top hair too, since we were talking about Carrot Top.
Well, this is why I say if they release the
Carrot Top
Snyder
wig.
cut, ain't gonna matter if they release the Snyder cut. He's still gonna be.
The
Lex
movie is still
Luthor
going to be
in it.
ass, like no matter what. I don't know why anybody cares about the Snyder cut. It's like it reminds me of the producer's cut for Halloween 6, which it's like, you know, this is the producer's cut, it's better, and then you watch it and it's like this is about as equally bad. Like this is maybe 2%
Okay.
less garbage than the theatrical cut. I mean, come on, guys.
It's like, hey, here's the guy who screwed up all the other movies, but we figure he'll do right this time.
And I've developed a low opinion of Zack Snyder. But anyway, so we're talking about the bombs.
Mhm.
And so the Terminator impersonates Sarah's mom,
Mhm.
and it's strongly implied that the Terminator has killed Sarah's mom.
Mhm.
And so Sarah gives up her location, and the Terminator comes for them at the hotel where they're hiding out. And we get kind of our last like big action sequence where it's still Arnold before we go into our effects sequence.
Mhm.
And like Arnold gets in a semi and is trying to like run them down, and they end up blowing up the semi truck, and they watch the Terminator burn in the flames.
Mhm.
And there's kind of a good relief moment, and this is sort of where the effects start to crack a little bit, at least more so for me, besides like the fake head,
Mhm.
where you can tell like it's a composite shot, like what's happening in the background isn't in the same spot, because the Terminator, with all of the Arnold disguise burned off of it, like rises up, and it's this very intimidating robotic skeleton. One of the most iconic things in film, honestly, too.
And I will admit that scene of the skeleton rising up behind them is pretty cool, even if
Actually, the stop motion they use for the skeleton for that thing is creepy as fuck.
The stop motion is really good. It's just you can tell that it's in like the background. You know what I mean? Like that's my only real gripe. That's my only gripe with it. Is it's like you can tell that it's not actually 2 feet behind them.
Well,
But it does work very, very well anyway.
Yeah.
There are definitely worse things, I would say.
So, and well, eventually, so, you know, they see the T-100, you know, fully exposed now, like coming for them, and they run into that factory, and they're able to, so the Terminator beats the crap out of Reese, but Reese is able to light one of his bombs and like stick it in like the fuselage of the robot, and it blows the thing apart. And sadly, this kills Reese, so that's the end of him. And we get kind of a sad moment before the Terminator gets back up. Like it's been blown to pieces, but the torso is still functional, and it comes after Sarah with its one arm.
I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
That's the moment where she becomes a survival girl.
Right.
She's the survivor girl at that point, and she's able to then take him out.
Yeah.
That's
like
a really
she gets injured by a piece of the Terminator that flies from the explosion, and so you know the Terminator can only crawl, but she can only crawl as well. So it becomes kind of a, and it adds a lot of tension to, you know, it's like, oh, the Terminator's crippled, they'll be fine. It's like, oh crap. And then she's able to finally defeat the Terminator by drawing it into like this metal press thing
Right.
and like crushing it in this compactor.
And I'll admit that was one of the things I remembered most clearly from my original viewing. I remembered how she dispatched it in the end.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we get like a Jaws line too. It's like, "You're terminated, fucker!" Wham!
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Good
pretty
stuff.
epic though, watching that scene.
Mhm.
Because really it is. It's a transition from her going from the damsel in distress to the heroine, essentially, at that point. There's no one left to save her but herself.
Exactly.
And that's really cool at the end.
Mhm.
Mhm. All right.
I think that this
We lose
film
it
is.
altogether.
I think that this film as a whole is definitely, definitely awesome in its retrospect, because I think that nobody had ever tried to do a cyborg movie before this. You know,
No.
not really.
Terminator?
Yeah,
Not
my
to
next.
this extent.
I mean, shoot, my next favorite cyborg movie after that is actually the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie Cyborg.
I like that one. And
Which is-
my
That was
next,
by Albert Pym, right?
no, Nemesis was.
There are too many cyborgs. I get them confused.
Albert
Well, there are
Pym-
multiple cyborg movies, which may be
Albert-
unfortunate.
Albert Pune was
Pune, that was it.
Yep. He created the Nemesis series. In fact, it's he didn't do the fifth one, but I know there's a sixth one and a seventh one in play to be filmed. But the original film was kind of a ripoff of the Terminator. It's not that he's a bad director in any way, shape, or form. It's very good, but
I mean, the Terminator is such like a cool concept. Like a lot of people would want to. It makes sense. A lot of people would want to play with it. You know what I mean?
well, he played with because he had been influenced by Predator and the Terminator. He played with both aspects of both films, and I think he kind of got into some trouble back in the day when he did those films. But now now he's kind of forgiven for them. But he was one of the first to imitate the
Terminator.
the Terminator and the Predator. Yeah, because he imitates
cool.
he imitates the Predator in the way that the Predator kind of cloaks itself. So the cyborgs that he created actually cloaked themselves. I believe, as the series plays out. So I should know I have the German Blu-ray box set, which is all region. But in any case, did anyone else have anything else to add to the film? Should we go on to the special effects?
Well, it has. So one of the best things. One of the things I enjoy the most about Terminator is the epilogue, where we see Sarah like several months later, and we get confirmation that Reese is John Connor's father. She's in Mexico. She's pregnant. She's preparing to go into hiding. In case more Terminators come, and she's starting to become the character that she'll be in Terminator 2.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that famous line near the end. It's like, "A storm is coming. I know."
Mm-hmm.
And then we get that awesome theme coming in again. And so like just everything about this movie really works. Like, it's so good. If you haven't seen this, what are you doing with your life?
You know what's weird is that, and I saw this one this time around. I don't know why. I just felt it was extremely campy. That last scene where they're staring out, and then they just have that like big booming music playing as they're headed towards the mountain backdrop painting. It's just I don't know.
It was theatrical.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It did not. I guess I'm. I had to go back to the '80s again to truly feel the camp level that brought back to me.
Feel the count. All right.
Feel a camp.
Maybe you're just looking forward to Camp Blood coming out.
Oh, that's our next film on this, right? We're just
I said the phrase "Sela Camp" in my head, and I don't know what that is. That's
our
weird.
next thing is going to be the entire Camp Blood series. Everybody watches all 8 films.
Right, and picks up the whole entire box set on Black Friday. Right.
Exactly, that's what you got to do. Way. But yeah, I mean, actually, with that being said, we've talked a little bit about the effects, and I think some of the effects, though, a lot of the stuff like the background shots didn't hold up. I do feel like some of the effects.
Most of the effects are pretty legit, though. I mean, even the effects that, where you can see the rough edges, and it's like, okay, I can kind of tell how they did that. Like, even those are like pretty top notch.
Well, and I think the effects myself look pretty legit, except for like you said, the rough edges, like the part where
the composite shots where this kind of really suffered.
Yeah, and for the film of its time, I mean, I know I was talking with my fiance, and she said she remembered when it came out, and everybody around her were like saying, "Oh, you should see this movie! It's so fucking awesome!" And when she went and saw it, she was like, "Eh." So,
well, it's not for everybody. I mean, as Jake has shown us, it really isn't for everybody. The film is.
It's a movie for the channel that have everything for guys who like movies, that kind of thing.
Like a Spike kind of thing, or?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Terminator 2. I mean, we discussed a little bit about one or the other having the greater appeal, and I actually consider Terminator 1 my favorite of the 2. Terminator 2 is the one that has the most appeal, because not everybody is going to get the horror notes and or even like the horror notes of the first movie, whereas almost anybody can get behind the action that is the sequel. We'll have to do the sequel movie eventually.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
We'll definitely have to do the entire series eventually down the road. But in any case, did we talk about the music at all? I think
we covered it a little bit in the beginning. So this movie has pretty straightforward music, but its music is also very iconic too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it all complements the like the scenes so well. Sometimes you don't necessarily notice it, yet it's still like there. Like during the intro, it's really dramatic with like the hammering like sound effect. Like I love that, the main theme for this movie. And then like during the love scene too, like it's the same theme except it's completely different. Like it's very tender and like slow and gentle. And like the music is just so well done in this movie. I was listening to the soundtrack earlier today when I was kind of out and about.
Okay.
And like I could remember what track went with each scene. Like there were a few so this does have like some kind of like songs in it, like dance music from like the club scenes and whatnot. And those are a little harder to remember for me. But this movie otherwise has pretty great music. So
okay.
They knocked that out of the park.
Let's talk about favorite scenes. Brandon, what was your favorite scene?
That is a rough one because there's so many awesome things. related to this movie scene wise. I would say my favorite of the whole would be when he first just kind of shows up at that gun shop and basically loads the gun and just blows the guy away. It's one of many scenes like that. Really, I'd say it's that type of scene where you get to just basically see him being that bad guy, that kind of just unstoppable creature that no one can actually take out. And at the end of the day, it was a miracle themselves that they managed to do it.
Dustin, what was a favorite scene of yours?
Well, again, this is a movie where every scene is just so good. Like, it's very difficult to pick a favorite. Can I be lame and say I'll be back? No, I can't do that.
You could if you wanted to.
I think I kind of like some of the more tender scenes, like where we get some like character exposition from Reese. Like we see, Reese have nightmares and like glimpses of what it's like in the future and just how much of an unbelievable hell it actually is. And when you have the context of like where Reese has come from, like it's kind of surprising he can like function,
I like. I think one of my favorite scenes is where he just comes in and blows all those cops away. But that's one of them. My other favorite scene, it's kind of a multiple of them. It's the flashbacks of the future that Reese has, because you get it in pieces, don't you?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Because like we see like one fairly long nightmare that he has, where he steals a car and he falls asleep in the car, and he's remembering like a raid or whatever they were doing on some of like the larger like killer robots in the future. And he sees somebody who it's kind of implied that he had a relationship with like die in that, and then he just has to like shrug it off and like keep going
and
keep fighting.
And what's interesting is that same photo that you see in the end is the same photo that you see that Reese
yeah, like Reese was given a picture of Sarah Connor by John Connor, and John didn't tell him why. And he kind of kept it like as a keepsake. Like he heard a lot about Sarah Connor from John Connor and kind of fell in love with her that way. And he's sort of embarrassed to admit it. But it ends up, all working out for the best, of course. But so he has a photo of Sarah that John gave him. And during one of the Terminator attacks in the future, like the photo is destroyed. And at the end of the movie, when Sarah's in Mexico, like prepared, like on the lam, some kid like takes her picture, and that's the picture that Reese has in the future. So that was a really nice like continuity callback too.
Yeah.
So the movie is very aware of like what its timeline is and how things work before it got all convoluted to hell, starting with part 3.
Jake,
which I do not recognize, by the way, as canon.
Jake, if there was a favorite scene that you could pull from this movie, what would it be?
It's difficult to say that one really stands out way above the rest. I'm tempted to go with the gun shop scene too. I think that was
a good scene.
It was interesting, and it definitely did work well thematically, and also mildly amused me. So it was a good scene. I agree that scene at the end with the photo caught my attention too. I did like that, as you said, the thematic callback. And I guess the fact that I remembered so clearly the Terminator getting crushed, it's the scene did leave its impression,
Okay.
But yeah, it's it definitely is one that I'll probably have to see it a couple more times before I can really start picking out bits and pieces that really do great for me. But one day.
Hey, where'd Mo go?
Yeah, I was on.
He had to duck out.
That's too bad. He didn't get to hear me say one potentially blasphemous thing I totally forgot to mention earlier, but you're talking about. I have not seen Rise of the Machines. That was the third one, right? I still have not.
It was bad.
Yeah, but
That's the sad thing with the Terminator series is
I've seen them all, but the newest.
Terminator and Terminator 2 are among the best just general movies ever made. So like you can complain, it's like, hey, what about Citizen Kane? What about Criterion? It's like, I don't care. They're two of the best movies ever made. And then pretty much everything after Terminator 2 is just unwatchable. I've heard pretty mixed things about Dark Fate. Like a lot of the horror people I know on Twitter were really into Dark Fate. Like they loved it. And then like a lot of, I guess, kind of general audiences were like, oh, this sucks. And at least some of the criticism was like, oh, the main characters are females now. And it's like, that kind of criticism, which you can just completely throw out. Or probably can't even call it criticism, really. Just so, I mean, Dark Fate might be okay, from what I understand. But
I've seen all of them, but Dark Fate. But
I mean,
I don't know.
I saw 3. 3 was pretty underwhelming, to put it very politely.
I've not yet seen Genesis or Dark Fate or whatever.
I think I saw Salvation, and that was pretty. That was pretty butt as well. I haven't seen Genesis.
That's the part where I was going.
It's not worth it.
I mean, I've heard only negative things about pretty much all the movies after Part 2, like Judgment Day, except for Dark Fate. Like I'm willing to give Dark Fate a shot.
I actually, I do have to say that the first two are probably the favorite of the series. The third one, I was actually fairly entertained by it. So I guess I haven't really heard as much negativity about that film as most people, but I know I heard a lot of negativity about Genesis and Salvation. That was trying to take another turn in the story, not involving Arnold. So I can see why people would have hated that, and I wasn't exactly a fan of it myself. So, but the Sarah Connor Chronicles, that is a fucking awesome show.
That was a decent show. Yeah, I didn't mind the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
I need to see that, but that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. But my TV watching is pretty largely non-existent.
I didn't feel like it was good enough to keep in my collection.
But here again, we see that every one of our movies this month had a TV series. And
it did, didn't it?
From what I've seen, the Sarah Connor
Chronicles
is apparently the most successful of the bunch. I mean,
I heard people say it was good. I just didn't count it like as a movie because it's not one of the movies.
Well, like I said,
considered it a part of the franchise.
The franchise has cool stuff in it, but when I was mostly referring to the movies because, like Mo said, there are a lot of really cool comics. There's even like Terminator versus RoboCop. There's all kinds of craziness. It's so good.
Which RoboCop just recently got an Arrow release, which I'm going to check out eventually. Soon.
Yeah, I was out in town today, and I didn't see it. I didn't see anybody carrying it, which kind of surprised me. But I think it just came out today, so it may take a little bit to show up at any of my usual haunts.
A lot of the Arrow ones are not always everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
But
I go to exclusive, and they usually have everything like the day it comes out.
Good time.
Although, good for you.
I'm happy with I have the old Lionsgate Blu-ray that has a ton of extra stuff on it, and it was at Dollar Tree doing one of their crazy, why is this here for $1? So I did buy that for $1. And hell yeah, I'm keeping it.
But yeah, I did want to. I
The
did want
RoboCop joke.
it, if only because this will completely, apparently, fuck with most fans of the franchise. The one Terminator film I actually saw in theaters was Salvation, and I actually enjoyed it. It's not a great film, but I did enjoy it. I paid a couple bucks to see it though, so that's. But I had to throw that out there, especially after you went on your rant.
Well, that's okay, but I think we're probably all wrapped up here, or
Yeah.
at least we should be.
I
So
think
yeah, long story short, the effects hold up. Like, it's an incredible sci-fi story with a lot of horror elements. Like, it'll probably scare you pretty good if you're not used to that kind of thing, because it did have genuinely scary moments, which is sort of rare for this genre. If you're like a jaded horror fan like me. But yeah, if you haven't seen the Terminator, like I said earlier, what are you doing with your life? Go see the Terminator, and then go see T2. Follow Arnold on Twitter because
Right.
I don't know, I said so, I guess. So, but with that, so I'm the Crypt of Horrors. I'm a horror collector living here in Milwaukee while I go to school. You can find my horror collection on Instagram at the Crypt of Horrors. And you can find me on YouTube doing pickup videos and just sort of showing off my collection. I even do reviews every once in a while. So that's the Crypt of Horrors on YouTube and Instagram. And I'm also on Twitter at the Crypt of Horrors. So, come hang out and we'll have a good time. And with that, I got to get going. So,
All right.
bye, guys.
Alrighty.
Enjoy.
So,
Go ahead, Brandon. Tell us who you are and what you do.
well, I of course am Septum
I did
Set of
not
Septum
delete
Set
studio
versus
button.
the world. I am. We run a nice channel that covers physical media and the appreciation of physical media. We do various things like movie reviews, top tens, and whatnot. We had been planning on doing an NIS tribute video this week, but we got sidelined by the whole Kappa bull crap. And actually, let me rephrase that to make this adult friendly bullshit. So we did a video on that instead. But we are going to pick up with that that general theme, the NIS theme, next week, if we can. Actually, no, you said you're late next week, Jake.
Yeah.
So
After we
we'll put it. We'll get it up there sometime in the month of December, or January, because we do want to also do our Christmas wish list video. I also do work for Inside Movies Galore, reviewing, and also I run the schedule around here, taking all of our suggestions to market and coming up with the top ones to run for the month. So December we are coming up on, and that is going to be, our typical December-themed films. We will be running our typical for the first 3 weeks, but we'll be taking the last two off because, well, 1 week is Christmas Eve and the other week is New Year's Eve. But in January, we're going to pick up the slack and have our others so that we will continue to go along with the top 5 voted. And we had some pretty easy leaders of the pack this time. So next week, we're going to hold off on that, but we have on our other weeks of December, we're going to have Santa's Sleigh and Silent Night, Deadly Night for the second and third week of December. And then when we start off in January, we're going to start off with some nice wintry tales with Jack Frost. And I don't mean the nice feel-good one, unless you consider Murder feel-good. And Devil's Pass. So next week, however, we're going to kick off our December month with a near and dear special that is a favorite of George Lucas himself, the Star Wars Christmas special. So we can definitely enjoy that when we come to it.
Definitely. I mean, I have not seen the Star Wars Christmas special ever, believe it or not, but I've always heard about it, and I've had a copy of it. I just haven't watched it yet. So this gives me a perfect opportunity to
Mhm.
visit it with you guys and determine whether it is on my shit or no shit list. So,
Well, it has a wonderful 2.1 rating on IMDb. Which actually I think today's Thanksgiving viewing had 3.0. So yeah.
hey, you want to know something? When I was looking at the Terminator, the Terminator IMDb thing, that I thought at one point there was a J in the soldier at one point before the show, but now that I look at it now, it doesn't have it there. But I thought that they had spelled something wrong. But any case, ladies and gentlemen, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back. In any case, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, and enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday, ladies and gentlemen. So, thanks for the traffic ahead of time.